An episode so little thought of, the official IMDb page has this image to describe it. What a fun episode. Hey, I'm Chris, and I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever, and today, we're looking at Todd Packer.
Yes! The pack is back! I understand nothing.
Kicking off with a completely unrelated cold opening is the Dwight Prepper standoff. And I don't mean it's unrelated from the episode just because the plot is unrelated, which it absolutely is. I mean that it's literally plucked from last season, made most clear by Pam's saleswoman attire. But that's because the related bloopers have this sequence in the season 6 blooper reel.
What can I do?
Your skull will be a soup bowl.
Cool.
But I'm going to talk about this more later in the ratings. As the episode opens up, Todd Packer, the traveling salesman and best friend of Michael Scott, explains his reasoning for wanting to get off the road and work in the office.
Truth is, I got a couple love bumps on my ding-dong, so I was like, oh, game over.
Michael explains their past to the camera and shows some fantastic photos. And some great detail was made to de-age and Photoshop Michael and Packer back into the 90s for both of these photos. But you'll notice that Creed is like an unchanged, immortal creature.
I want to sell your blood.
Oh, and Pam's predecessor is probably this kindly old lady. And as Michael takes the photo away, you can see that he kept that parrot from the bottle Jim and Pam presented him last season. Upon meeting Packer, Holly has the wool pulled over her eyes in this practically useless interview. While the office staff has their concerns, Todd makes quick work of confirming their fears. Soon thereafter, Aaron and Gabe arrive late to the office as it seems a fire department was called to help Gabe get out of the shower that morning.
And it took the fire department forever to get there.
This kicks off the B-plot invoking the PC jealousy. Meanwhile, Packer gives Dwight the boot from his old desk, and a lot of the sales staff confront Holly for her decision to onboard Hot Toddy. Meanwhile, Andy makes a spectacle of how terrible his computer is.
If you donated my computer to Africa, it would become famous as the slowest computer in Africa.
And generally speaking, only one person cares. Having now experienced Packer for more than just a minute, Michael asks Holly her thoughts on the fella, and she's pretty quick to tell him how she really feels about the guy.
Honey, he's a jerk.
Dwight, having an accomplished history of poisoning people, does find it a little bit more difficult to pull one over on Todd Packer. This spurs a team up, one that Dwight is a little less than enthused about. That is until Dwight gets the 400 revenge ideas that Jim sent him. Different standoff occurs in the office when Erin gives her fancy Mac to her ex-boyfriend. And I can't tell if Andy's attempting to gaslight Pam here or not.
Pam, when I'm freaking out, I just sort of step back, take 3 deep breaths.
Okay?
What I do know is that Andy loves his grandma.
If my grandmother ever dies, I'm going to kill myself.
Either way, the standoff ends with Pam on top. Andy confronts her a little later, though, telling her that it was really embarrassing that they had to have that exchange out in the bullpen. Pam actually concedes pretty quickly to that, and she tells Andy that if his machine were to break, she could get him a new one, which leads to a fantastic montage.
BitTorrent streaming from a Somalian music website? Yeah, why not?
Michael, maybe sensing that Dwight's caffeine corner might be a good place for civil discourse, gently confronts Packer on some of his problematic behavior. And Todd seems to actually have a genuine reaction to Michael.
Don't give up on me.
I won't.
But, being totally aware of narcissistic behavior, Kelly calls out Packer quite loudly, as does Oscar. But Michael still believes in Todd, and that's all the motivation that Dwight and Jim need to enact their desperate measures protocol.
Eat a brog.
Andy and Pam scuff up a new PC to hide their heinous deeds, but the real trickery is happening in the annex. Dwight and Jim call up Packer pretending to be native Floridians to convince him to head down to Sabre Corporate immediately. Michael finds out and he moves to fill Packer in on the gig, but on his way, Andy and Pam put on a show.
Where'd you even find this thing? Like in the corner of the warehouse?
Yes, I found it on a shelf in the corner of the warehouse.
While Michael attempts to let Packer know about Dwight's scheme, Todd really Packers the whole situation up just by talking. Michael concedes and lets his friend drive out of his life for good. Holly gives her sympathy, and the two really morph from Mark Wahlberg to Al Pacino impersonations.
What are you, wicked smart?
Oh, you are.
Hoo-ah.
Close with Daryl confronting Pam about the PC they found in the break room, and he blackmails her.
I think for it to be blackmail, it would have to be a formal letter.
Well, whatever this is, Pam actually feels pretty good about it, so that's cute. Like I said, the Todd Packer episode feels like a really big deal, so let's dive into that in the deeper meaning to see what's behind the big, bad, vile, balding Peck man. That was hard to say, and I'm not going to say it again.
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Cat.
First, let's build some lore around the character himself. Packer is a caricature of a guy that I think most of us who've lived in an adult world probably know quite well. Not to mention, I'm not entirely sure how many degrees of separation there are between Packer and real-life David Koechner.
Do you think you get someone to drive me around because of the DUI situation?
But that's a totally different video altogether. Point is, the character has always existed for two reasons. First, he's a villain of sorts for most of the, quote, normal characters in The Office. His problematic behavior begins all the way in the pilot episode of the series.
Hey, is old Godzilla coming in today?
I don't know what you mean.
Look, I've been meaning to ask her one question. Does the carpet match the drapes?
The first time we see TP on screen, he's immediately inappropriate, talks about his recent DUI, and makes disparaging comments about his peers. Gets drunk at the Christmas party and passes out, takes a dump, I guess, on Michael's floor, does this in the costume contest episode.
Why don't witches wear panties?
Oh, here we go.
Because they need to grip the broom.
And somewhere in there gets so trash he almost ruins a perfectly good Scarn dance sequence. Most people just can't stand the guy.
What has two thumbs and hates Todd Packer? This guy.
Michael, though, it's a completely different story. Michael laments that Dwight embarrassed him in front of Todd Packer in the basketball episode.
When I let him come to my pickup game,
I apologize for that.
I vouched for you.
Michael,
I vouched for you in front of Todd Packer, Dwight.
He shares this story about Packer basically idolizing him.
And we met this set of twins, and Packer told them that we were brothers. And then Packer did both of them. It was awesome.
And he also shares this story in the convention episode.
Packer decides to make out with her. Her boyfriend is the bouncer at the bar. I don't make it to the car. The other bouncers caught up with me. Really did a number on me.
Packer baits Michael into sending scandalous pictures of him and Jan in the Back from Vacation episode. And even Elizabeth's first visit to the office was Packer's idea. The drama in the St. Patrick's Day episode is largely driven by Michael wanting to be with Packer at the bar. It's clear that throughout the series, Michael is quite smitten with Todd Packer. And while thinking about why that may be, it kind of hit me like a sock to the gut, continuing this pseudo-psych profile I've been building on Mike throughout the season. We know one thing for sure. He's got some daddy issues. Meaning that Michael, generally speaking, had an absence in his life of a man that he really respected. And it's safe to assume he probably attempted to fill that void with things he saw on TV or, just like older guys in his life. Enter Todd Packer, a guy that has all of the confidence, all of the success with the ladies. Michael thinks he's hilarious, he's successful, and he's literally everything that Michael wishes he'd be. And that makes Todd Packer, this guy, the ideal man in the mind of Michael Scott. This is why he's so enamored with the guy.
Todd Packer can do anything.
Except pass that breathalyzer.
And that's why Holly's opinion of Packer means so much to Michael. The real question is, why does Packer care about this puppy who's just following him around? Why does he not damage Michael like he does everyone else around him? On one hand, it seems like Michael turns a blind eye to Packer's faults, often excusing his behavior as a temporary lapse in judgment or some other Stockholm Syndrome type thing. On another hand, he's probably just too stupid to really pick up everything that Packer's putting down. But I think the answer's more in what Michael means to a guy like Todd Packer, and that's validation. If a kind-hearted, good guy like Michael Scott can see value and humor in Todd Packer's life, then hey, what's the big deal? So he probably goes out of his way to include people like Michael in on his life just to string them along. This parasitic relationship that Michael and Todd have kind of borders on a codependent long-distance coworker thing, which I'm not really sure you're going to find in any psych books. But if you think about it, for every dumb joke that Packer makes that Michael laughs at, Todd feels validated. And for every ounce of attention that Todd Packer pays Michael Scott, Michael feels validated. meaning that the significance of Michael allowing that prank to play out is akin to releasing this guy's power over his life. That's why this moment is such a big deal.
Sounds great. Yeah.
It's gonna be so good.
That is, it's gonna be awesome. I think you're really going to enjoy it down there.
And I don't think it's just a defensive thing like, oh, you made fun of my girlfriend, well, you can go to Tallahassee. Michael's gotta be thinking that if anyone knows him and cares for him, that person would never attempt to break him up from Holly. That if there's one thing that he's sure of in this life, it's her. Michael realizes in this moment that he's outgrown the man he idolized so much, and he finally sees him for what he is. So what's up with this computer B plot? I'm not entirely sure. It might be a stretch, but I think it's possible that it's there to suggest that some old relationships in our lives can be toxic, and those might need to be replaced with relationships that can allow us to grow as humans. It's just unfortunate that this huge growth moment for this character is wrapped in an episode which is kind of bunk. More on that in the ratings.
This is the worst.
Okay, cold opening. Other than having nothing to do with this episode at all, as previously discussed, I cherish Jim Dwight's cold openings. This one though, well, I can't help but think that the reason that they pulled this unused bit from season 6 is due to what I'm about to talk about in the episode itself. Overall, it's good. It's not great. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. As for the episode, I don't think they really stuck the landing for this one. Now, it's entirely true that I generally have not loved episodes that have featured the character of Todd Packer in the past, and that's completely fair. I'm not a fan of the character, but for the deeper meaning, I don't think I'm making this one up. It's there in the subtext. This moment when Holly greets him in the office feels big. It feels sincere that something huge just happened. And it's more than just some D-bag is getting his comeuppance and Michael sort of sees through Packer's bullcrap. It's bigger than that. It's why this episode is before one of the biggest episodes in the entire series. In other words, when everyone was in the room and they talked about all of the ways that they could show Michael Scott's growth throughout this season, dealing with this problematic relationship with Todd Packer was on that short list. The problem for me is that this episode continues to bore me with the loosely related B-plot, while continuing to give me anger and sadness from every blow that Todd Packer gives Kevin throughout this one.
You know how to read a menu.
And by the way, that is a solid choice. I think Kevin slowly being affected by Packer's words throughout this episode, while trying to save face, both serves as a microcosm for how everyone has had to deal with this dude from, however long he's worked there. But it also serves to agitate us, the audience, against this villain. The problem is I think they flubbed the execution. You have to weigh out all of those feelings. Everything that this doucherito did to our boy Kevin is completely unresolved. The B-plot feels completely unnecessary, and it blots out the drama of everything boiling up with Packer, leading to, I think, an episode that's not quite appreciated for what it could have been, and what it was actually intended to show. Or maybe it's just because I straight up hate this character. I don't really know. I mean, I know I'm supposed to, he's a villain, but, I just know way too many Todd Packers. Let's shift to some positive things. I think that the Jim Dwight team up is fantastic. The tender moment at the end of this episode, everyone rallying around Kevin is great, and there's some decent joke telling in this comedy episode.
And I don't want to say the other one was old, but its IP number was 1. Right?
Overall, I'm going to give Amelie Gillette's first outing with lead writing credits a 2 out of 5.
Everybody knows that I can dish it as good as I can take it.
So they gave lead writing credits to a completely inexperienced writer for an episode this late into Michael's last season.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
But that's all I have to say about Todd Packer. Until next year, that is. That leaves us next week talking about one of the biggest episodes in the series, the garage sale, which is gonna be dynamite. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.